worst advice Gooby ever gave to her sister, Snoopy, was that if she knocked out all her teeth, then the Tooth Fairy would give her money plus a really special reward. So, in the middle of the night, Snoopy decided to pull out almost all of her teeth. She pulled out 3 before their mom came in the room asking, "What the hell are you doing?" Snoopy told her what Gooby had told her, and their mom punished Gooby with no tablet and no TV for 2 months. It turned out that someone at school told Gooby that lie, and she was even planning on pulling out all her teeth that same night. That was when her mom told her the secret about the Tooth Fairy, making Gooby sob for 2 hours. Can we please get an F in the chat, boy? Dolan was a teenager. He was big into the Red Hot Chili Peppers. In one of their videos, he saw the whole band performing while wearing nothing but socks, which weren't on their feet. This made Dolan curious because it looked rather uncomfortable. To cut a long story short, Dolan's dad walked in on him one night unexpectedly, only to find Dolan wearing nothing but a sock on his wiener, singing at the top of his lungs. They made eye contact before Dolan's dad backed slowly out of the room, and they never spoke a word of it again. For some reason, he stopped listening to the Red Hot Chili Peppers for a while after that.
Dolop had fallen asleep many times before in class inside his hoodie that was 2 sizes too big for him. One night, before midterm test, he decided to go to bed early instead of studying. On the way out the door, Dolop grabbed a hoodie and an extra t-shirt. He shoved the t-shirt into the hood and stuck his phone in the pocket. When he got to class, he started the test, and whenever the teacher wasn't looking, Dolop pulled his hood over his head and tucked his head inside. He then used the phone in the hoodie. To this day, he still uses that method and has never been caught.
Every Halloween, Carl and his friends used to go trick-or-treating around the neighborhood, collecting huge stashes of candy and making themselves totally sick. One year, Carl thought he'd get more candy if he expanded his trick-or-treating route. So he went to some houses in the next neighborhood. He went up to one house and rang the doorbell. The door opened and Carl and his friends were about to shout, "Trick or treat!" until they saw what was on the other side of the door. A creepy teenager was standing there jacking off with one hand and holding a bowl of candy in the other. Carl said,
"What the fuck is going on here?"
and backed away. The incident scarred him so badly that he never went trick-or-treating again.
When Andy was 7, she accidentally walked in on her brother peeing. She was a very naive little girl and didn't know anything about the male anatomy. It was a big surprise for her to learn that boys stood when they peed. Later on, Andy was having dinner with her family when the conversation somehow turned to the topic of men peeing. Andy jumped up from her seat and said proudly,
"I know where boys pee out of."
Andy's parents looked really worried, as they hadn't yet given her the talk. Her dad said, "You do?" And Andy blurted out,
"Yeah, from their belly button."
Everyone at the table laughed. Andy never figured out what was so funny until sex ed in 8th grade. She now cringes at how innocent she was.
One day, Ladybot traveled to an art convention in Dublin, Ireland. She was a manga artist and attended them often for inspiration. One morning, she went to a diner to eat breakfast. She sat at a table and ordered her food. Without realizing, Ladybot had been staring at the waiter, and he noticed this. When he brought her food, he delivered the check with his number written on it. They ended up texting for months before officially dating. They are now married and very happy, although his thick accent is still hard to understand.
Pandora went to a house party once that was so boring, she got really drunk just for the entertainment. Unfortunately, she became so intoxicated that she became incredibly lewd. She walked up to a door and yelled,
"What's up, sexy?"
at the top of her lungs. She then whispered sexual things to the door and started making out with it. She doesn't remember much after that. In the morning, she felt really bad for that door. Must have felt very violated.
When he was in the 8th grade, Salty Squid's ex-girlfriend got angry with him when he broke up with her. Later that day, she sent him a message saying that he had to come to her place. When he got there, his ex-girlfriend pulled out her dad's gun and tried to shoot him. The bullet hit the wall instead, and Salty Squid ran outside and into the woods. She ran after him, yelling, "Why do you hide? We can have fun." He called the cops, who came and arrested her. Salty Squid never saw her again.
When Hellbent was 7 years old, he had a horrible nightmare. He saw himself in a dream, but he wasn't able to interact. He was motionless and just sat there with his eyes wide open. He watched himself get up and grab a knife from the kitchen and started to slice his own arm. The cuts got deeper and deeper, and what came out of his skin wasn't blood. Maggots and bugs crawled out, and as he kept cutting himself, he turned around and faced himself. His face was missing, and you could see his eyeballs drooping out of his skull. The maggots crawled their way toward him and they grew larger and uglier. He woke up screaming in terror. Needless to say, he didn't get much sleep the rest of the night.
One day, Gooby was walking home from school when she went down a creepy alley, which was part of her usual routine. Then, out of nowhere, a man appeared and whispered in her ear, "You taste nice, especially in bed. See you tonight." Then, he licked Gooby's hair before pulling some out. Since that day, Gooby never even looked down that alley.
One day, when he was 9, Emoji and his family were at GameStop browsing for games for the Wii that they were just given by their grandparents. Emoji went over to the shelf and saw a game that he played all the time at his friend's house. He grabbed the game and saw that it was almost $60. He didn't want his parents to pay that much for a game, so he grabbed a pre-owned Wii game, which was priced at about $12. Then he grabbed the Wii game he wanted, cut the tape on the side with his fingernail, opened the pre-owned game the same way, switched the disc, then put the pre-owned game in the new game's case back on the shelf. He adjusted the tape on the case that the new game was in so it didn't look like he cut it, brought it to his mom, who then brought it to the counter and bought it. Emoji waited for days after that for someone to call his mom and tell her that they knew what he did, but it never happened. To this day, he still has the game, still in the pre-owned game case.
This may sound gross, but Pandora craved 50W motor oil when she was pregnant. She would sip from the bottle like it was a milkshake. During both of her sisters' pregnancies, one of them ate a lot of hot, spicy foods. The hotter, the better. It would give Pandora heartburn and indigestion just watching her. Then her sister would chase the whole thing with pickle juice. Not the pickles, just the juice. To answer that burning question, she had 2 girls.
When Ghost Toast was in 11th grade, he had an ongoing assignment throughout the school year to keep a journal and write down answers to a question written on the whiteboard at the beginning of every class. The class would briefly discuss their answers after class started, and every few weeks they would turn in their journals to get them graded. But Ghost Toast used the journal for more than just that one assignment. About halfway through the year, Ghost Toast was in a pretty low spot, so he wrote down his thoughts and musings in the back of the journal to help him deal with them. At the end of the school year, he was shocked to see that his teacher had left remarks on them. At the time, he was mortified, but then inspired. The teacher gave him positive feedback and inspired Ghost Toast to try to become a writer.
When Spinal Palm was in 7th grade, the majority of his grade despised him because he had autism. They used to bully him relentlessly, but the worst had to be during one day in Spanish class when everyone behind him decided to chuck pencils at his head. When the teacher left the room for a second, Spinal Palm had enough, stood up and kicked his desk. The teacher came back into him yelling at the whole class and sent him to the principal. A few days later, his Spanish class thought it would be funny if they told this one police officer that worked at the school that Spinal Palm threw a desk at the teacher. He ended up getting arrested, going to court, and serving 6 months of probation.
When Legna was in 6th grade, he had an irrational fear of bread. Legna had some bad experiences with moldy bread in the past, and it freaked him out. As a result, Legna never bought a sandwich for lunch that year. It got so bad for a little while that he had to wear a blindfold to lunch so he wouldn't have to look at other people's sandwiches.
Well, on the account of being a spirit, Ghost Toast never really got caught very often. The only time he did was when he was using his phone in math class. He was watching anime by putting his phone on his tendril in such a way that it looked like he was concentrating extra hard on a problem. But since he was in the same position the whole time, his teacher got suspicious and looked under the table. The worst part is that they thought he was watching porn, but he wasn't that stupid. Come on now, he's not a ghost for nothing.
When my brother was at school, he saw a group of boys trying to impress a girl, and the shortest guy there had a BMX bike and was trying to show off his mad biking skills. He rode around a bit and was getting ready to pop a wheelie, but as he did it, he was looking at his friends and not paying attention to where he was going. He ran straight into the girl he was trying to impress and came off his bike, crashing headfirst into a bike rack. When he tried to get up, he hit his head again and lurched forward, putting his face straight into the mud. The moral of the story? Don't use girls as speed bumps. They don't like that.
Hellbent was in the act with his girlfriend when he was young, and she said that she wanted him to wear a dress while they performed. Hellbent hated the idea, but he loved her a lot, and he owed her for something. A week later, he obliged, and he wore the dress. And guess what? While they were in the middle of the action, her dad walked in on them. He could never look his girlfriend's dad in the eyes ever again, and to this day, Hellbent always makes sure the door is locked.
The most desperate thing Doopy ever did was launch herself out of her chair and start dancing around the classroom, serenading her crush on Valentine's Day. Her teacher actually helped her set it up. Her cue was for the teacher to make a comment about quickly serenading her Valentine. Doopy didn't end up getting together with her crush, but she was called a rock star for the rest of the school year. She didn't even have a good singing voice.
Robo believes her home is definitely haunted. One night, she was walking to the bathroom when she saw a huge smoke cloud in the hallway that was in the shape of a person. She quickly ran back to her bedroom, ducked under her bed, and watched as the cloud wandered around her room before floating into another room. Then she saw two white eyes glowing in the corner of the room. After they disappeared, there was no explanation or trace of the cloud. Sometimes, when it's a foggy day, Robo can still see the mysterious cloud eyes looking at her.
Mona and Ladybot were sitting next to each other on a bus talking once, when suddenly the bus came to a stop and the bus driver stormed up the aisle and stood at the seat next to them. He looked at the boys next to them and demanded they hand over anything that took pictures. They had no idea what was going on, so the driver explained that whenever the bus went over speed bumps, the creepy guys were taking photos of the girls because of the way their boobs bounced around. Ramona and Ladybot were so pissed off that they smacked both the perverts on their way off the bus.
The weirdest thing I ever had a family member do was being a rapper sniffer. He was a pretty weird guy. He'd always sniff the rappers off chocolate, candy, bread, anything that had a wrapper, or anything that was even wrapped in something. Aluminum foil if it was wrapped, only if it was wrapped specifically too. He would sniff it, and he would always say, chocolate. Use the food in a wrapper. It was pretty weird when he came along, because always at the end of the day, he'd always ask, please, please, let me sniff your wrappers, baby. A true rapper sniffer indeed.
When Honeybits was little, she overheard the phrase, don't waste your breath, and took it literally. She believed that everyone had a limited amount of air in their bodies and would die when it ran out. So, Honeybits decided to be careful not to waste her breath. Her parents and teachers worried that she'd gotten really quiet, but Honeybits was just thinking that she wanted to prolong her own life.
The worst nightmare that Pringle ever had was when he was 11 or 12. He was at his grandparents' house and went outside to check out a noise that he had heard. When he went outside, he froze. Pringle saw a wolf twice as big as him, with orange fur and glowing red eyes. The wolf stared at him, and it growled. Suddenly, it jumped on Pringle and started biting his arm. He screamed for his grandfather, but he didn't answer, so Pringle kicked the beast, and it fell off of him. He ran, but it caught up and started chewing his leg. Pringle screamed, then he grabbed a knife and stabbed it in the heart, but it only just got angrier. The wolf then suddenly jumped and it bit his throat, and that is when Pringle woke up, panicked and terrified.
One night, Nixiam went out to dinner with his friends. While they were eating, Nixiam overheard a very drunk couple at the table next to them. They were having an argument about which one of their children was the worst. The father thought the oldest child was the biggest pain in the ass ever, but the mother argued that the middle child was worse. They were getting really angry about it, and a waiter had to tell them to be quiet. In the end, Nixium heard them come to an agreement. They decided their middle child was definitely the worst.
Gooby was walking with her little brother and her uncle when she decided to call her dad so that they could all talk and catch up. At the time, her phone storage was pretty full, which made her contacts list a little out of whack. She dialed what she thought was her dad's number. She waited and the phone went to voicemail, and she heard the voice of her crush instead of her dad. She immediately hung up. As it turned out, her crush's number was only 1 digit different from her dad's number. She hoped he would just ignore it, but he called back 5 minutes later. Gooby picked up and frantically explained herself. He responded with a simple, "It's all good. It's all good." She felt so embarrassed.
Legner was pretty skeptical when his friend told him about a tree climbing job where the person who climbs the furthest up a tree gets paid by the public. That was until he saw a crowd of people gathered around a 20-foot tall tree, cheering as 4 people tried climbing at the same time. Legner's friend got him set up with the job, and he got ready to climb in front of a huge crowd of people in his town. Got about halfway up, then he slipped, fell out of the tree, broke his arm and leg, and injured his hip. Legner not only lost his own tree climbing job, but he got everyone else fired as well, as they decided it was too dangerous. Thanks, Legner.
Honeybits has 3 roommates, 2 who are awesome and 1 who's an inconsiderate slob. Even though she's a full-grown adult, this horrible roommate doesn't know how to wash dishes, vacuum, shop for groceries, do laundry, or even change a freaking toilet roll. She constantly steals her roommate's food and barges into their rooms without knocking. But the thing that frustrates Honeybits the most is that she's never once taken out the garbage, even though she walks right past the garbage room whenever she leaves the apartment. One day Honeybits got really sick and had to stay home from work. She told her roommates she would be sleeping all day and not to disturb her. But sure enough, Honeybits' horrible roommate barged into her room carrying 2 big bags of stinky garbage. She dropped the bags on the floor, putting bin juice everywhere, and said,
Hey, Honeybits! Take these to the garbage room. I'm going for Starbucks.
Honeybits gave her the evilest stare anyone has ever given. Her roommate's face went completely pale and she said,
Okay, maybe I'll do it then.
Ghost Toast was at a hotel with his family, enjoying some free food. Everything was normal until this man came along. His right eye was shut, and Ghost Toast just thought he liked keeping that eye closed. The guy, who was in his 50s, said, "Hey, can I tell you this real funny joke?" Ghost Toast was eating a pretzel at the time, so he couldn't respond, but his mum said, "Yeah." So the man told them these jokes that Ghost Toast had heard in elementary school. His mother laughed and they all thought he was going to leave, but to their surprise, he pulled up a chair and started telling them personal information about him. Ghost Toast was kind of uneasy since he's, shy, so he kept shoving pretzels in his mouth. Then the man started asking them about their birthdays. When his dad questioned the man's reasons, he got kind of aggressive. After that, he told them a story about how he lost his eye, which was in a woodworking accident. After a very long amount of time passed, he started talking about how he was a 50-year-old virgin. Ghost Toast got extremely creeped out and worried that his little brother would ask what a virgin was. Thankfully, his dad said they had to go back to their room and they left.
Spinal Palm had a crush on this girl, and one day, she invited him to her house to hang out. For a while, they just sat around and played video games until she said to him, "I hear you have a crush on me. Is that true?" He nodded, and she paused the game. She told him to follow her to her room, and when Spinal Palm got inside, he saw a snake that was about 6 feet long in a glass case. She pointed to the snake and said that its name was Sylvester, and told him that if he really had a crush on her, then he would let Sylvester slither all over him. Spinal Palm reluctantly accepted her challenge, and she got the snake out from the case. She put the snake on the floor, and it slithered towards him. It started to travel up his leg, and from that point on, he stood absolutely still, hoping that the snake wouldn't bite him. Her face lit up, and she gasped in awe. When the snake was done slithering all over him, she put it back in its cage and gave Spinal Palm a big kiss.
When she was in 5th grade, Melissa fumbled around a lot with her words. One time, when she was chatting with her friends, her crush Nixium walked up to her and asked if he could have her cheese stick. Melissa mumbled,
"Yeah, I love you too. Yeah, you can have my please. Wait, no. No, I meant, can you kiss my mouth?"
When Nixium asked what she had just said, Melissa mixed up her words even more and said,
Yes, you can kiss my mouth hole.
Her friends stared at her for the longest time, but Nixium sat down and kissed her. It was the best screw-up Melissa ever made.
When it comes to eating, Nixium's brother has some very strange taste. He's completely addicted to barbecue sauce and maple syrup, and won't eat anything unless it's covered in them. He'll put maple syrup and barbecue sauce on anything. Eggs, fries, cereal, cookies, or even pizza. He's so addicted that he has an entire cupboard full of maple syrup and barbecue sauce in his room. If he ever ran out of sauce or syrup, Nixium's brother said he'd rather starve than resort to eating food without them.
When Spinal Palm was 10 years old, it was extremely ball-dripping hot, and so he took off all of his clothes and started to watch YouTube. His dad shouted for him to practice guitar, but Spinal Palm's door was closed, so his dad didn't hear him start playing. 5 minutes later, his dad came up to the room to see if he was practicing, and what he saw was Spinal Palm, totally naked, playing his guitar. "What are you doing?" his dad shouted. Spinal Palm screamed back,
I was hot. What are you doing?
His dad tried not to look at him, and he just walked out of the room.
When Stydius was born, he had a deformity on his tongue. The doctor told his parents it was harmless extra skin. As he grew, the lump of skin also grew, and now it is as big as his actual tongue. Most people don't know of his deformity, but every now and then, he accidentally reveals it by laughing out loud or yawning, and people can see it inside his mouth. Most people run away in disgust before he can explain that it's just a harmless growth. Doctors told him they could remove it, but it doesn't cause him any pain. Just the occasional freaking people out.
When Gergak was in 4th grade, a pretty unfortunate thing happened to him while he was at school. He was walking down a crowded hallway during recess, and 2 of his teachers were standing there talking to each other. Just as he walked by them, he had a horrible feeling in his face, and suddenly he let out a very loud sneeze, followed by a thunderous fart. Everyone stopped to look at him, too shocked to even laugh. Thankfully, one of his friends whispered, bless you? And he kept walking. To this day, he can't look those teachers in the eye.
1 year ago, Doopy's housemate did something very shocking. She was showering and her flatmate banged on the door. He told her to get out because it was his turn and he needed to get to work. She finished showering as fast as she could. He kept banging and said, "If she didn't get out right now, he would break the door down." She didn't think he was serious, so she kept drying herself. Thankfully, Doopy was wearing her robe because 2 seconds later, her impatient housemate kicked the entire door off its hinges. He threw her out the shower, but she had the last laugh when she had him evicted.
Tolop took Spincess out for a movie and a fancy, expensive dinner, and Tolop paid for everything. They had a great time, and then when they got back, they gazed into each other's eyes, and Spincess said, "You are everything I want in a boyfriend, but you are not that good looking. I need to break up with you." She didn't even say thanks for dinner.
In junior high, Zaragamba was crushing pretty hard on a girl in his class. For weeks, he would stare lovingly at her from the back of the class, admiring her long blonde hair. He didn't have the nerve to go up and talk to her, but one day, he decided that enough was enough. He wrote her this epic letter where he declared his feelings for her. He arranged to sit next to her in class, and then somehow, he found the courage to pass her the note. He watched her unfold the letter, glance at it, and then crumple it up with disgust. Poor Zaragamba. She may as well have just scrunched up his heart.
Melissa's little sister was having a birthday party once with a bunch of her friends. They asked Melissa if they could see her pet hamster. As she picked her hamster up out of its cage, one of them said, "Can the man hold her too?" Melissa's parents were out, so she asked her, "What man?" The girl replied, "The man waiting on the sofa." She immediately went to see if her parents had returned, but the whole house was empty.
Salty Squid used to be a stoner who lived with his family. His stepdad was very strict and against any form of drugs. It was snowing and freezing outside one night, so Salty Squid decided to use his dry herb vape while burning some incense to help with the smell. As soon as he finished smoking and playing on the computer, his stepdad burst through the door and screamed, "Do I smell weed?" Salty Squid was so stoned that he flipped backwards on his bed, looking at his dad upside down, man. He said,
I'm sorry, I have weed-scented incense. I won't burn it anymore.
His stepdad believed him and even told his mom. His mom gave Salty Squid a look, almost giving it away. Mom was in on it the whole time.
Back in high school, Kyle M was staying over at Gergak's house for the weekend. They were playing Halo 3 when Gergak's wireless controller batteries died. They went searching for batteries and ended up in his mom's room. Gergak started digging through his mom's dresser and he found a battery-powered vibrator. He went to his mom, vibrator in hand, and asked her, "What the hell is this?" She replied with, "That doesn't work." So Gergak turned it on and it started vibrating. He then took the batteries out and handed it to his mom, and they went back to playing Halo like nothing happened. A couple of weeks later, Gergak found the vibrator again, put the batteries in it, and proceeded to chase his sister around the house with it while moaning.